Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
I trusted her. I fought wars, risked my life, while she lay in bed with another man. A man she thought would protect her, but she didn't know I knew. I watched them from the shadows. My revenge, already in motion. I sent him to the front lines where death waits. I didn't need to kill him. The war would. And her? She'll suffer knowing she was the reason. I loved her once, but now I'm just waiting for her world to crumble. Revenge isn't sweet. It's cold. And it's mine. April 1944. Madame, may I offer you some coffee? Oberstleutnant Peter Baumann asked in a friendly manner. He said may, in a way that suggested he preferred she not accept. I know you French enjoy your coffee, but I kindly ask you to try some tea instead. The coffee we have in these times wouldn't be good enough for even the worst people in a Berlin prison. But my tea, he smiled sincerely. He lowered his voice, as if anyone would be foolish enough to listen in at this Abwehr headquarters. My tea comes straight from Harrods. Baumann spoke French perfectly, with a clear Parisian accent. Anyone who listened closely could tell he had spent a lot of time in Paris before the war. He stood up and opened the top drawer of a gray file cabinet, taking out a tin of Twining's tea. He placed it on the desk between them. When I say straight, he added, I mean by way of, well, you probably don't want to hear the details. His guest, Madame Sylvie Guy, sat on a wooden stool. I could tell she would have been holding her handbag if she had been allowed. She seemed uneasy, but not overly so. After all, this was Vichy France. She and Peter were supposed to be allies, but no sensible Frenchwoman truly trusted the occupiers. Madame Guy showed just the right amount of respect expected in front of an Abwehr officer. She didn't seem scared. Through the small oval mirror on my side, I observed her closely. I couldn't see her legs or feet. She might have been moving them a bit. This small building, taken over by the local German army in 1940, was located in the quiet town of Saint-Vrain, in the Côte d'Armor area of Brittany, France. The questioning, though polite, was serious. It happened in what looked like a lawyer's office. The walls were filled with old wooden bookcases stuffed with thick books about French law. These shelves had been moved aside to make room for simple metal file cabinets. The difference between the beautiful, warm wood and the cold metal gave me a feeling about the two cultures that briefly met here. Sylvie Guy was a seamstress from Dreux, a small town about 40 kilometers west of Paris and 300 kilometers from where she was now. Her travel papers said so. These papers had been taken from her when she was stopped that morning. She explained that she was so far from home because she was looking for her brother. Gabriel Guy lived in Brest and had last contacted their family 4 months ago. Now their mother was very ill, and Sylvie was determined to find him and bring him back home. She had traveled by train and truck, and for the last part of her journey she rode a bicycle she had borrowed without asking from a cafe in Medrac. Feeling guilty about borrowing that bicycle could help hide other, more serious mistakes. I thought Madame Guy was clever to protect herself that way. Less experienced questioners might easily believe her. She wore clothes suitable for traveling: a cloak, sturdy shoes, a cloth covering her head. Oberstleutnant Peter Baumann busied himself as promised, preparing 2 cups of tea using a kettle on one of the filing cabinets. He hummed a tune as he set the cups on the desk. Calmly, he took out a large covered bowl and a spoon, as if having sugar for tea was completely normal in these times. She had learned that trying too hard to stay calm often made her reveal too much. Nam did not blink. She might have blinked. Any person from France would be surprised by so much kindness these days. But Peter's simple act of making tea had caught her attention. He was skilled at getting information from people, even when they didn't realize they were sharing it. As they sipped their tea, Baumann glanced out the large window at the setting sun and the quiet street outside. A lovely day, he said kindly. She nodded. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. This is a great day for riding a bike. She noticed how he said inconvenience. The teacup almost stopped moving on its way back to the table. I looked over your documents. She drank carefully without spilling a drop. I admired her commitment to her part. And I have good news, he added. Your brother is nearby with the local authorities. It's just for some questions. There must be a misunderstanding that we can clear up with your help." She slowly nodded in careful agreement. "Sergeant!" The loud call surprised her, but it would have startled any innocent Frenchwoman. I entered the room. This was the real test. Her eyes quickly met mine, then looked away, seemingly unfazed by a simple Frenchman, even one wearing the colors of Vichy. She didn't seem to care that I wasn't from France. She didn't mind that I should have been far away. She didn't even react to the fact that her husband had just shown up. "My name is David Voigt. Until not long ago, I was a captain in the United States Army. I might still be. Everything that led me here is still pretty unclear to me. I felt that there were hidden tricks and secret plans, but I was never told the full story. I just learned the how and when. To explain, let me tell you a different story. In 1939, the German Air Force began dropping bombs filled with explosives onto England. Most of these bombs went off as intended, but some didn't work properly. These heavy bombs were designed to fall straight down quickly, sometimes burying themselves deep in the ground. While an explosion can cause damage, it can be cleaned up, but when a bomb fails to explode, life around it comes to a halt. Barriers go up, and warning signs are put everywhere. If this happens near a busy area or an important building, it can disrupt everything. To fix this, the Home Office called in the Royal Engineers, who were skilled at digging and handling such situations. I can imagine a moment when a serious adult in a suit casually said to an engineer, "Since you're down there, why not disarm the bomb while you're at it?" This led to more situations in wartime where the wrong people were sent to do a dangerous job in the wrong place with the wrong tools. And do it right. Wait, I need to take back what I said about the wrong people. That wasn't fair. I took the easy way out with my words. In reality, those engineers were incredibly brave. I've spent time with some of them after closing down pubs, and they would complain in clever yet funny ways, then go out and work with live bombs, sometimes while enjoying a cup of tea. As for me, I was also handling my own challenges. Instead of bombs, I was dealing with wooden boats. I had been in London for 2 months before Dunkirk. I came over as an aide to the military attaché at our embassy, which mostly meant I had a lot of free time when I could have been preparing a rifle company. The draft was coming back home soon, meaning many young men from farms and cities would be joining my army. As a captain, I would train these eager newcomers into a strong team so they could withstand real situations and stay safe. Rumor had it that with so many new recruits, I could quickly be promoted to major, and then perhaps lieutenant colonel, taking charge of a whole battalion. I was excited about these opportunities. I loved London. I enjoyed the pubs, the historic buildings, and everything royal. I also appreciated the local charm of the people who admired my accent just as much as I admired theirs. Still, I was eager to return to my main role of leading young soldiers. Good thing I didn't rush to buy oak leaves for a rank insignia. That would have been tempting fate, while what actually happened turned out to be even more challenging. August 1940. It was a bright, hot, and humid day. This weather was unusual, I was told. I felt sweat running down my back, but I still got a chill when I entered the room. I quickly stood up straight. Colonel Lee, my boss, was sitting at his desk. He had opened all the windows wide, hoping to get some fresh air. He was showing a shiny photo to the man standing behind him, who was looking over his shoulder. This man had white hair and a round face with a nose that looked like it had been hurt before. He wore regular clothes, but it was clear from the way Colonel Lee talked to him that he was an important person around here. Colonel Lee finally looked at me and said hello, but he didn't introduce the man. That's when I realized this older gentleman held a high position. "Captain Voigt," Lee said. "Relax. Please stay." With that, they walked past me to the door. Colonel Lee paused and said softly, "Trust your instincts, David." Then they left. Before I could think about what was happening or if the heat was messing with my mind, the door opened again and one of Lee's secretaries walked in. But it wasn't one of them. I paid attention to all the women in the building, and she wasn't one of them. She had long, shiny black hair and big dark eyes. Her nose was a bit flat and her lips were bright red. She looked very young, almost like a teenager, dressed in a light blue plaid dress that seemed very comfortable. I wanted to trade clothes with her, but I tried not to focus on her looks just in case she was someone's younger sister. I waited for her to realize she might have walked into the wrong office looking for the cafeteria when she spoke to me, Captain David Voigt. It wasn't a question. She spoke with an accent I couldn't quite place, though I usually recognized them well. I thought maybe she learned Polish or Hungarian, then moved to England as a child and picked up English in Liverpool. "You grew up in Brooklyn, Maine," she said. Her voice showed that this small woman was someone people listened to. "That's right," I replied, even though it wasn't really a question. "Your father, your family builds ships." "Yes, ma'am," I confirmed. She made it sound like our small boatyard was making huge battleships instead of smaller boats and occasional motor yachts. Why was this stranger asking me questions? Why was I responding? I figured both Colonel Lee and someone with higher authority must have let her come in. I still couldn't guess her age. Finally, she smiled. "It was a nice surprise, like having ice in your drink on a hot day. You know a lot about building and running small boats on the ocean?" Not exactly how I'd phrase it, but I nodded. "Yet you went to West Point, an Army school instead of a naval one." "I did." Was that supposed to be a question? She spoke English like it was something new to her. For a moment, she was quiet. I sensed she wanted me to ask her questions, but that wouldn't be polite. My mother taught me to use manners effectively. "Tell me a joke in French," she asked. "Make it funny." The warm breeze from the windows had died down. The heat felt heavy, like I was standing too close to a fire. This strange meeting felt like a test of patience, and I was determined not to lose. Okay, maybe I wouldn't win, especially against someone like her who seemed to enjoy the challenge. I would be okay with a tie. I told her a funny story about a Scottish man who fell asleep after a night of drinking. A young woman walks by and notices his kilt blown up by the wind. She takes advantage of the situation and gets on top of him, enjoying the moment. After a while, she gets off, takes a blue ribbon from her hair and ties it around him as a funny keepsake. When the man wakes up, he looks down and says, "I don't know where you've been, but I'm glad you came in first." I heard that joke when I was too young to really get it. It was still funny in French, but my listener didn't laugh. I almost told her what a kilt is and acted out the story. Then she asked me in German to explain what a kilt was. Her German was perfect. How did I know? My father is German. He came from Kiel when he was a teenager. My grandparents on his side had 7 kids and many grandchildren. Whenever I visited them, everyone spoke German. If a young Voigt wanted something to eat, they would ask for Wurst, Spätzle, or Kirschtorte, not sausage, noodles, or a slice of Grandma's chocolate cake. I have been to Hamburg several times, and they couldn't tell my German apart from theirs. My mother's family, the other side, is from Quebec. The Gagnon family mostly lives there but loves to travel. They treat the Maine coast like a fun vacation spot and visit Grandma Gagnon's farm often, turning it into a lively festival. The clever grandchildren learn to rush over whenever they hear the grown-ups calling for poutine or tourtière. With just a few tweaks in my phrasing, my French sounds British, and then it hit me. I'm not slow, but I'm not clueless either. Boats, French, German. This woman didn't want me to review last year's report about planes and write a long memo. Instead, she had a different plan for me. In the next hour, she completely changed my future. To sum it up, if I wanted to start a new path now, her offer was the way to go. If I didn't accept, she would leave, and this conversation would be forgotten. 6 hours later, I sat at my desk in room 561 of the Cumberland Hotel, writing a letter to resign from my position as an Army officer. I was giving up on a goal I had chased for most of my life. Now that I was so close, I was ready to walk away. All because of a brief chat with a mysterious woman who promised me thrilling work instead of desk duty. I didn't even know her name. It probably seemed crazy to make this choice, but I felt deep down that it was right. I had to go through with it. As I finalized my letter to the Army, there was a knock on my door. She walked in as if she owned the place. The Cumberland had rules about women being alone above the lobby, but that didn't seem to matter to someone who had a way of getting what they wanted. She didn't look at me. She headed straight for the bed and began to remove her dress with a calm confidence. I had anticipated this. She turned to face me without a hint of embarrassment. My gaze shifted momentarily, but then something caught my attention. I noticed scars around her stomach, a mix of colors, some unsettling. I quickly shifted my focus back to her face, realizing I had been holding my breath. Those marks told a story. She just stood there quietly, allowing me to look at her for as long as I wanted. In an instant, I moved closer and wrapped her in a gentle embrace. We shared a moment of connection, feeling the warmth between us. She seemed to catch her breath for a moment as I touched her, but there was a sense of calm between us. Our eyes met, and it felt like she gave me a silent acknowledgement. I placed my hand gently on her stomach, feeling the warmth of her skin, and continued to hold her without paying any attention to the marks that told stories of past challenges. My touch was meant to reassure her, showing that those scars didn't matter. With that quiet connection still between us, I took her hand and led her toward the bed, ensuring she felt safe. She lay down, and I changed into more comfortable clothing in a simple, unhurried way. There was no need for words as we moved closer, sharing a moment of peace and understanding. We stayed together in silence, both knowing that the past was behind us and that we could find comfort in each other. Everything about that night was gentle, and though we had come from different paths, we found a shared space where words and actions weren't needed. It was a moment of release, a way to find a little peace in the middle of everything that had gone wrong. It was not about control or dominance. It was just about being present with one another, finding solace amid chaos. In the end, it was clear that the connection between us, while brief, was something that gave both of us what we needed at that moment. One summer in Quebec, Simone, a distant cousin, took care of all three of us. I returned home to Maine that fall with a better understanding of how to interact with women, but nothing more. This time, the woman in front of me, whose name I didn't even know, resisted. It took a lot of strength and effort to hold her steady, drawing on old memories of wrestling techniques from my school days. I held her there for what seemed like a long time until she finally stopped struggling and let out a breath, signaling the end of her fight. I leaned forward and offered a gentle gesture of comfort after the tension between us. "I don't have any protection," I said between breaths. She didn't respond, but instead held on to me tightly, showing that she wanted me to stay. We remained close, sharing a moment that was brief, but felt significant. Afterward, I paused, considering the past, her scars, both seen and unseen, and how far she had come. She pulled me back into an embrace, reassuring me with an understanding glance, and we lay there together, finding a sense of peace as we drifted off to sleep. When I woke the next morning, something felt different. A beautiful woman with sleepy eyes and wild, tousled hair was lying beside me. She was quiet, simply looking at me, and there was a peaceful stillness in the room. I moved closer to her, but she leaned back, keeping her distance. Still, we stayed close in a quiet, shared moment, as if time had slowed down. She moved gently, her presence calming, and I watched, content to be in the moment with her. Until my body reacted unexpectedly, I felt a wave of surprise wash over me, but I remained engaged. She responded to me in a way I appreciated, moving with energy, as if caught in a moment of intensity, breathing heavily. Then she gently fell away from me. We lay together in quiet comfort for a while, listening to the sounds from the street below. A cool breeze came through, making my warm skin feel refreshingly prickly. "Did I do okay?" I asked. She laughed, the first time I heard her sound happy. "Yes, I needed to understand for myself if I could trust you. I didn't ask what might have happened if I hadn't measured up. You have many questions. I cannot answer them all." She took my hand and placed it gently on a scar. "I was taken in Wiskitki, near Warsaw. You probably haven't heard of it. No one has. They captured me time and again. When they were done, they decided that I didn't deserve to hold on to anything that connected me to that time." A chill ran through me as I listened to her. She spoke so calmly. I felt my hand wanting to pull away, but she held it firmly against her with surprising strength. No wonder I hadn't worried about protection. "We may never meet again, David Voigt. But if you need me, just ask for Chodakowska. Have you ever driven your car down a familiar road in bright daylight, and suddenly a huge moose appears in front of you? You hit the brakes, turn the wheel, and end up stuck in a ditch full of logs and bushes with no one around to help? I haven't, but what did happen was pretty close. It looked like a fishing boat, about 25 feet long, with a cabin in the middle and an open back. A quiet yet powerful diesel engine made it speed along smoothly. She was low in the water and moved quietly, almost hiding completely on the nights I took her towards the French coast. My tasks were straightforward. I would pick up a passenger, ask them a question, and if they answered correctly, I would take them back to England. If they didn't, well. By morning, I would be back at the dock cleaning up. This routine continued for a while until they decided I should take passengers over and drop them off. Sometimes I would wait for them or go with them a little farther inland to help them with their tasks. Whoever they were, they believed I was a Canadian because of my mother, which made me part of the Commonwealth. So I found myself with more and more responsibilities. They thought I should teach my passengers a few helpful skills before I let them go. Remember the man who thought he could just show up at the spot where the explosion had happened, dig a hole, and then return home in time for tea and cookies? I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the day we heard about Pearl Harbor, I was managing a camp near Heathfield. I was responsible for training, placing, and helping over 100 agents move in and out of occupied France. We had become a part of the Special Operations Executive some time ago, but nothing changed. Everyone was too busy rushing around to stop and think about who I was and why I had so much of His Majesty's resources. After the news from Pearl and with the U.S. joining the war, I figured someone at the War Department would dust off my file and call me back into action. January 1942. She slammed the door behind her, startling me. I had been focused on writing a rough schedule for the next training session. I often lost myself in thought as I considered our past mistakes and how to teach the next group to stay safe. "I'm sorry, David," Moira said with a sly grin. I couldn't blame her for it. The door was stubborn and needed a hard push to close. The whole building felt a bit off, built by local guys and older men who were not quite right in the head or the body. The area we called the campus, offices, living quarters, training spaces, kitchen, and dining hall, was full of leaks, poorly insulated, and ready to shake at the slightest wind. The only strong building nearby was the old stone house, which we saved for special guests and events. I went back to my list of names for the class that would arrive in 2 days. "No," I said without looking up. "Not a chance." Moira leaned over my desk, hands resting on the surface, in a stance that made her look quite determined. The cold air was so biting that I could see her breath. The last name on the list was typed differently than the others. Moira Haining. "No," I reiterated. I made the mistake of meeting her gaze. Moira had wild red hair, sparkling green eyes, freckles, a strong nose, and a bright smile with teeth that were adorably uneven in a way that felt intentional. She was also my best teacher. A while ago, she decided she wanted to be more involved. I shook my head. "And you know why." "You only have one reason," she replied, "and it's not very strong." I actually had 2 reasons. The first one I had mentioned to her many times since her brother was lost in action. She knew too much. It sounded like something from a detective story, but it was true. She had been my close assistant since about a month after I opened this place. She met every agent who came through our school. Her sharp mind held every detail about our organization. She couldn't be captured by the enemy, and she understood that danger. Despite this, she still wanted to go. She knew the risks involved and told me she was ready to face them if necessary. I believed her, but I hoped it would never come to that. Much of my concern came from something else I hadn't shared with her. I cared for her deeply. I'm not sure how it happened. She felt like a sister to me at times, perhaps even a daughter. Our bond was complicated, especially with the constant pressure of sending our brave agents into dangerous situations. It made it hard to have the usual relationships we might have defined before 1939. None of those roles fit our situation. About a month after she joined us, we returned from training in the Rocky Hills of East Sussex. Wet, tired, and hungry, I came back to the news that 2 of our agents had been captured. I showed the message to Moira, who sat down, looking as worn and defeated as I had ever seen her. I made us some tea, and we enjoyed a cup with a biscuit by the small fireplace. As we warmed up, we took off some of our layers. She finally wore just a thin cotton shirt. She gave me an intense look as if searching for answers, then set it aside. My living space was just off the office. We moved quietly to my cot, hands busy adjusting our clothing. It wasn't what it may have seemed. While it might have looked like one thing, it was truly something else. It was about letting go of our worries, our pride, our mistakes. It was a way to find some peace. It was a moment of seeking answers and trying to make things right. A few hours later, we lay quietly in each other's embrace. The day still felt heavy on our hearts, but the pain was a little less sharp. "This wasn't a good idea," I whispered. "You're right. It wasn't." We kept making that same mistake. Then her little brother was lost at sea with the HMS Donegal. I understood how it happened, but I couldn't remember when my feelings changed from attraction to something deeper. I needed a different word for it. I didn't love her like I'd loved other women before. I loved her as a friend, a teammate, a partner, an equal. "I just need one reason," I said. She let it go and went out to get ready for the upcoming class. That night, as I was drifting off to sleep, my door creaked open. Moira quietly came in and slipped under the blankets. Without saying anything, she drew closer to me. I was about to move forward, but she quickly stopped me with a gentle yet firm hand. "Not like that," she said, her voice soft but clear. The way she said it was uniquely her. She reached over to my bedside table, searched through a drawer, and took out a small pouch. While she was preparing things, she said, "I never realized until now how much you truly care for me, David." My silence was heavy. It wasn't agreement or disagreement. Maybe it was just recognizing where we stood. "Having a child would change everything," she continued, trying to sound casual, even though we both knew it was a significant matter. "And you would want to make it official with me, David. I know you well. You would spend your life with a woman to help her." She finished her preparations and embraced me. She gasped, then whispered softly, "This is a kind of love that not many women experience." The next morning, she joined the new recruits. September 1942. Today, I met the second group since Moira parachuted into France. 4 stood in what some might call a line. I didn't mind. If these 4 had been under my command in the U.S. Army, their sergeants would have said some tough things about their intelligence and ability to follow orders. Here, their formation was good enough. The truth was, none of these new recruits would have been allowed to wear the Army uniform back home. For one, 2 of them were women. One of the men was black, and, well, the other guy might have managed to join, but at just 5'3" and a slim build, he didn't look like a soldier. If his local recruiting office hadn't met their numbers, he might have had a shot at joining for some fun. That made sense because Michel was indeed a soldier. He was a Jewish boy from Calais who was in the French Marines. He escaped when his unit was captured by the Germans in 1940 and made his way to Palestine. One of my scouts pointed him in the direction of London, telling him to go into the Barking Maid pub in Fulham, order a drink, and wait for a contact at a back table. The other man, Akinele, said he was born in Paris to parents from Nigeria. Akinele NMINLN, no middle initial, no last name. 10 seconds after meeting him, I sensed he wasn't telling the whole truth. I didn't take it personally. We had gotten him out of Dorchester Prison, where telling the truth was not the norm. He had many skills. He could forge documents, trick people, sneak in and out quietly, and start fires. He was the ideal agent. Doris was a nurse who lost her job for helping some of her elderly patients find peace in their final moments. She was a nice-looking woman in her 30s, fit, smart, and spirited. She had strong opinions about how things should work, which ended her career and landed her in prison. We always kept an eye on new arrivals in places like that. Often, the qualities that make someone a criminal can also make them a good field worker. The last person we looked at was a younger woman, 25, thin, dark-haired, and striking. My contacts were always searching for someone who stood out. A woman agent with charm had an additional advantage. We had hired a few before, and it had paid off. This woman, however, was not a recent find. A government official, someone I owed a favor to, called me. He asked if I could help a young woman he found living on the streets of Bristol. I agreed to take her in and see what she could do. I knew she wouldn't have any prior skills in the training we offered, like parachuting, radio work, Morse code, or self-defense. Living on the street teaches many things, but not these. However, if she was mentally and physically fit, her lack of experience could work in our favor. We wouldn't have to change any bad habits if she didn't have any to begin with. So these were the 4 new candidates we were considering. I had 12 weeks with my 5 teachers to teach our group everything they needed to know before they were given code names and sent to the continent where the Nazis were. 84 days to prepare them. I wished we had more time, but we didn't. I shook their hands and introduced myself. I could tell from their grips and expressions that they carried some secrets. One of them was Jane, a girl who had lived on the street. She shook my hand firmly. Her skin was soft, her eyes clear. If she had truly lived on the street, then I must have been living in a fairy tale. I asked her in French what made her think a girl from the streets belonged in my special team. Without pausing, she started to share her story. She said she was born to a mother who struggled to make a living. As a child, she worked in a dark, cold place, cleaning and carrying coal. After her mother passed away, she didn't have a place to go. She mentioned being taken in by nuns, but then facing difficult experiences. Eventually, she claimed to have escaped and returned to the streets. Her story seemed too far-fetched to be true. I could tell she was clever with her words. Still, her French accent suggested she was from the area around Lyon, and that mattered to me. I knew she wasn't really from Lyon, but her accent could fool others. And the way she looked me in the eye while telling her tale showed she had skills we could use. I raised my hand to stop her and then led everyone to their first lesson, Morse code. After a few weeks practicing, they would come to call it Morse. Code October 1942. The Barking Maid pub on High Street in Fulham looks like many others. It's a place where hard-working factory workers come to enjoy a drink after a long day. The 2-story building, made of brick, is worn and in need of repair. The outside is dirty and grimy, reflecting years of wear. Inside, the low ceiling creates a cozy but dark atmosphere, filled with the smell of spilled beer. I was sitting at a table in the back with a pint of brown ale and a folder of secret messages. Yes, secret messages out in public at a pub where anyone could see them. But this was the Barking Maid, one of the special pubs across the country where members of different intelligence groups could gather and feel safe. The friendly bartender and his slightly tipsy helper were actually there on official business from a special unit. The kitchen was run by sailors who were there to help with intelligence tasks. There were more hidden tools stored behind the bar than you'd find in a regular place. The staff knew all the regulars. If a stranger appeared, they would watch him closely to see if he was a danger. If they decided he wasn't a threat, they might politely ask him to leave. But if he came back, he wouldn't be treated so kindly. I looked over the sheet I had been working on. It was filled with neat rows of letters and numbers grouped in 6, along with my careful notes using the code for that day. Each day, the code changes, and the key for that day is written in a small notebook. The pages used by agents are made of special paper that can easily be burned if needed. I read the message again, this time taking it all in. The small network in Cannes was working well and sending back important information. The Germans had lost their advantage 2 years ago when the Royal Air Force defeated them, stopping them from gaining control of the skies above Britain. It seemed the Nazi leaders only knew 2 ways to think, overconfident or overly suspicious. The Luftwaffe had believed they would quickly defeat the RAF in just 2 weeks, but that plan had failed. Now, the Germans feared that the British forces might attack them from across the Channel. They were wrong about that too. The United States was in the war, but most of their focus was on the Pacific. The Allied forces ready to attack the French coast were not very strong at the moment, but the Germans were unable to trust or understand useful information. All their reports had to fit their strict beliefs. This rigid thinking distorted the truth. In Cannes, we had 3 sources of information. We called them Maelstrom, Whippoorwill, Parsley, and Clafoutis. I tried not to fixate on the name. Moira was Clafoutis, and whenever I looked at that word, I felt a wave of regret and worry. You can't manage a network effectively if you have personal feelings involved. I had broken many rules I set for myself by caring too much. Sergeant Turner was training his 4 recruits in close combat. It was clear that Michel had some experience and only needed to practice a bit. Akinele was strong and quick, but he had been a thief, not a fighter. Doris had learned to handle difficult patients. These 3 followed Turner's instructions quite easily, but Jane seemed overwhelmed. It was unlikely she would ever need these skills, but it was important to have them just in case. Turner had a no-rules approach. In his system, nothing was off limits. If an agent found themselves in a fight, it was for survival, focusing on vulnerable areas like eyes, throat, and knees. Jane revealed her inexperience within seconds of sparring. Someone who had truly lived on the edge would have reacted faster, using whatever they could to defend themselves. Instead, she struggled awkwardly, and Turner had no trouble overpowering her and bringing her to the ground. I watched briefly before returning to my never-ending paperwork. After tea, there was a short break before the evening's lessons. As I walked along the path past the barracks toward the old house, I caught a glimpse of something in the shadows. "Good evening," she said, stepping out. I nodded in greeting. "Jane, how are you?" "Sore. Sergeant Turner doesn't hold back." She moved into the light, and I noticed she had changed into a simple white shirt dot. It clung to her in the warm evening, and she seemed relaxed, though I knew she was pushing boundaries. She caught me glancing her way and smiled, aware of my gaze. "Any advice you can share?" she asked. I hoped she was asking about self-defense. "Well, the most important thing is to avoid confrontation altogether. If you see someone before they see you, just leave. But if you get caught, don't show fear. Walk right up and ask for directions or something like that." She flicked her cigarette, closed the distance between us, and without warning, put her arms around my neck. "Or something," she whispered with a smile. I kept my hands still, resisting the urge to respond to her bold move. "Or something," I said quickly. "That might work." We didn't have any contact for the next 11 weeks, but I watched her training closely, and she noticed me watching. She wasn't the best in any of the subjects, but she wasn't bad either. She even managed to take down Turner a couple of times with some clever moves. What she did possess was intelligence, charm, good looks, and a special appeal that she knew how to turn on when needed. These traits, especially the last one, were not something anyone could teach. The class was not the best we had ever had, but it was pretty good. I met with my contacts in Whitehall several times to discuss where these graduates might be assigned. The last meeting just a week before the graduates were to leave for their new posts. I was deep in thought about this as I drove back to the camp. I was in a bad mood. The Germans were advancing in Russia. The Japanese had taken control of Southeast Asia. There were whispers about secret weapons from the Nazis floating around the halls of Parliament. In response, we sent out new recruits, filled with nothing but a daunting amount of courage. I parked in front of our offices and felt a spark of worry. Sergeant Turner, who was in charge while I was away, stood stiffly in front of the door. I didn't see anyone else around. The camp seemed quiet and empty as I got out of the car. I shut the door and looked at Turner, who appeared troubled. I had never seen that expression on him before. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his Liverpool accent clear. "They just came and took her." I wanted to tell him to relax, but I wasn't even sure what my rank was anymore or which service I was part of. "Her?" "Jane, sir. They asked for Lady Anne." "Lady Anne Jennings." I was taken aback. "Lady? Didn't you tell them to stay away? This is a restricted camp. How did they get past the guards?" Turner stood even taller. I held back my urge to tell him to relax. It was his way of dealing with the confusing situation he found himself in. "One of them was a general. Unbelievable," I said sharply. "They shouldn't be—" I paused. "Jane? Lady Anne?" Turner nodded sadly. I checked my watch. The ride back to London would take over an hour. It might take longer if I ran into sheep, carts, or broken-down trucks. The sun was low, and driving in the dark with dim headlights was slow and risky. I sighed and got back into the Hillman. I had some issues to sort out. Unbelievable. As I drove, I pushed the Hillman hard, shifting gears roughly as I ground my teeth. Neither the car nor my teeth were coming out of this situation well. It explained some of her questionable background. She was someone who played at being a spy, and she had gotten past me, wasted my time and my team's time, taken up valuable resources. I was going to find the general, General Wilhite. At least Turner had gotten his name. Then I was going to confront him. If I happened to see Jane or Lady whoever along the way, I would find out more about the local nobility. It wasn't the first time I had faced the strange divide that underlined much of the war effort in this country. It seemed to be a leftover from the Great War, where too many leaders came from families with titles rather than experience. Who your grandmother was mattered a lot when it came to leading many young people in Britain. Every army had its heroes and disappointments. The U.S. had some names that helped people move up in rank, but the British had clearly set rules. There were at least 3 groups, though calling them real professionals feels like too much, started by people from wealthy families who mistakenly thought they were meant to control intelligence work and treat those who actually did the work as beneath them. I'm not trying to put down the Special Operations Executive, Naval Intelligence, the RAF Intelligence Branch, or MI6. These are skilled and important organizations. But the British sometimes overlook the problems that come when those from privileged backgrounds get involved in such important tasks. I couldn't shake the feeling that Wilhite might be related to Queen Victoria and just like to disrupt things. It felt like he was interfering with my efforts. As I drove up to the plain building where the man who was my closest boss worked, the night sky was dark. He was the one who could help me get money, support from the Royal Air Force and Royal Navy, and everything else I needed. His office lights were on, and the blinds were closed. His secretary greeted me warmly. Though she had a kind face, she had been carrying a hidden weapon since 1938, just in case. Boyce was behind his desk, going through a pile of papers, his unlit pipe resting in his mouth like a baby's pacifier. He didn't look up. "Why didn't you just take care of him?" I paused. Boyce looked like a dull government worker, reading uninteresting reports and signing useless papers, but he knew everyone and everything. My guards can hardly see, and one is missing a leg, but they aren't foolish enough to shoot a general. He finally looked up at me, and I thought he might actually smile if given enough time. Could be someone who bought a fancy costume from a shop in the West End. Mulligan recognized him. He served under him in Ypres. Boyce nodded. "Next time, you're allowed to shoot. Just aim to scare him a bit." "Yes, sir." I always called Boyce sir. It felt respectful, and I wasn't sure of his rank or mine, so I played it safe. I didn't salute him, but if I met his wife, I would call her ma'am. From what he said about her, I might even salute her. Is he running his own plans? Taking my chances? It was possible the general was up to something and needed a good-looking young French speaker. If that was true, my security was in real trouble. We kept our operations quiet, but Boyce shook his head, dismissing those worries. "No, he's just a worker with a flashy hat." "Then why is this happening? Who is she?" Boyce took the pipe out of his mouth and looked inside it, scraping it with a finger. "The trainee you had on the list as Jane Winston is really Anne Jennings. Lady Anne Jennings, daughter of the late Duke of Suffolk." I felt pity for her. "I don't care who she is," I replied. "We spent 11 weeks training her. My sergeant says she was taken against her will. I want her back." He pointed the end of his pipe at me. That pipe seemed to inspire him, I swear it did. "Don't you read the news? Her father passed away last Tuesday, so he's no longer the current Duke. She was taken to the funeral." I shook my head. "Then why didn't she want to go?" "I really don't know," he replied slowly. The Duke of Suffolk's family home was Monmouth House, located just north of Salisbury. I left London at dawn and reached the estate in 5 hours. The house was a large stone and brick square, lacking the charming details I had seen in other homes. Monmouth looked more like a government building that had been left unfinished. The front gardens were overgrown. The driveway needed fresh gravel, and the lawns were uneven with brown patches. The surrounding area also needed attention. It reminded me of how places lose their charm when young and lively people are taken away by conflict. An old man answered the door before I could knock. He hesitated for a moment, sizing me up as if I were a danger to the house and its people, though I could see he was not in a position to stop anyone, and then asked what I wanted. "I need to see Jane Winston." He regarded me with a blank expression. "Lady Anne Jennings." He showed a slight sign of recognition before closing the door in my face. I hoped he meant for me to wait, as I had no intention of leaving. Soon enough, the door opened again. The elderly man waved for me to come in. The lady of the house welcomed me in a library. She was sitting by the fire, looking so composed that I sensed she had anticipated my visit, if not today, then at some point. She did not stand or extend her hand. She shared Jane's features, but was more mature. Her hair remained a dark black, free of gray. It was surprising for her to be a widow. "Your Grace," I said, introducing myself. "David Voigt." She gestured for me to sit in an empty chair across from her. As I settled in, an attendant brought in a tray with a teapot and cups. As he poured, we studied each other. "You've come about Anne," she said. I nodded. She sighed quietly and shook her head. "I suppose you are her commanding officer?" She looked at my casual clothes with clear curiosity. "Something like that," I replied. I could see in her body language that was hard to miss, even if her face stayed calm, that she wasn't used to being challenged. It seemed to bother her. Too bad I only had my deflection techniques to offer. Her last name didn't unlock my secrets. "You didn't know about her service?" I asked. "Service? I didn't know anything about it. She hasn't been kind enough to fill me in on what she has been doing these past months. Last I heard—" She took a sip of tea, hinting that she felt misled. "Last I was told she was visiting New Zealand for a while." Nice job, Jane, I thought. Believable and clever. The Duchess went on, or should I call her something else now that the head of the family was gone? What was it? Dowager Duchess? Those were the details of high society I didn't like. It was her father, may he rest in peace, who allowed her to join your group. With all due respect, ma'am, your daughter is training for a role that is important to the war effort. That may be true, she said, but I'm taking back my permission. She is needed here. I looked around the room in response to her words, and she caught my glance. I could sense what she was thinking. This was about 100 years of family history and duty to their name. The troubles of the outside world didn't seem to matter to her. Needed here? For what? To clean off dusty shelves of old books? Anne has 2 suitors. One is a captain in the Royal Navy leading a ship in the Mediterranean. The other just became a colonel in the Coldstream Guards, and he's in Africa. When they have time, they'll come home and show their intentions. She'll likely be engaged by next Christmas. She paused. Both are from noble families. I nodded. What else would they be, trying to win the heart of a duke's daughter? I would guess, based on the look of Monseath House and its grounds, that the 2 men hoping to marry came from families that still had their money. In truth, Jane felt like just another item in the rich world around us. She was someone to be acquired rather than just someone to spend time with. I wondered if deep down she wanted to be more than just a person meant for marriage. Did she volunteer for this role because she hoped to find meaning in her life? The Duchess and I exchanged polite but empty words for a while as she tried to get information from me. Even though she pretended not to care, it was clear she was curious about where Jane had been instead of New Zealand and why I thought that training was important. I didn't give anything away. Then I heard the front door open and a woman called out. It was definitely Jane, and I realized how long I had known her by how familiar her voice sounded. It made me feel a little strange. "Mother, whose car is in the—" She stopped suddenly, just stepping into the room. She looked surprised for a moment, then apprehensive before rushing to me. I stood up and welcomed her with an embrace. She whispered softly in my ear, just loud enough for me to hear. "Thank you." Another person stood just inside the doorway for a moment before walking in confidently. He stretched out his hand as Jane let go of me. "James Griffiths White," he said. "It's great to finally meet you. Anne has said many good things about you." I shook his hand and shot Jane a look that conveyed my disappointment for discussing me with her friend. "Anyway," he continued, "if you ever need help, just let me know. It sounds quite thrilling." This time I looked at Jane with clear disapproval. She turned her gaze away, her cheeks tinged with color. James, the eager volunteer, was a chubby man with a round face and thinning blonde hair. I thought about the complexities that come with close relatives marrying as I sized him up. He seemed like someone who had never really worked hard. He was not who I would have picked. Her Grace's sharp sense of social cues kicked in. Maybe it was politeness, or perhaps she sensed that I was close to losing my temper with James. She stood up with Grace and announced that dinner would be served soon. "We won't dress formally for dinner tonight," she said. "James, would you be so kind as to choose a couple of bottles for us? Something nice for the occasion?" He bowed slightly and they left the library together. "Occasion?" I asked. Jane's gaze lingered on the empty doorway. "His engagement." I raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Not to me, David." It felt like she read my mind with just a look. understanding my thoughts without needing to express them, but her tone suggested that she wouldn't have been upset if it had been her. She met my eyes, and I realized we were silently communicating. He's 14th in line for the throne, David, and she's a princess from the Netherlands. A princess in hiding was certainly more impressive than the daughter of an English duke. Jane, as Lady Anne Jennings, couldn't match real royalty. In London, I had been casual drinking buddies with a Hungarian who claimed to be, and actually was, the Prince of Szabolcs. It didn't matter that his little kingdom was just a tiny, forgotten piece of land, and that his father, the king, was stuck in a German jail. It didn't even matter that he looked like an everyday guy with barely enough money for a drink. He claimed, and I had seen enough to believe him, that when an Englishwoman found out he was royalty, she couldn't help but get very flustered. "It's amazing," he would say. "These English girls. To be close to a prince is like a dream come true for them." I gently placed my hand on Jane's shoulder and turned her to look at me. "What about after the funeral?" She looked down and shook her head. "I can't come back." "Understood," I said, offering my arm to guide her to the dining room. Our group didn't require any formal commitments or promises. You can't have agents who are anything less than completely dedicated. If Anne decided not to be Jane, I wouldn't be able to persuade her to return. At dinner, the Duchess showed impeccable manners, carefully including everyone in the conversation and giving each guest attention. Yet, she still made sure to highlight James as the most important among them. Anne spoke to me as a guest and former boss, but her gaze often drifted to James, revealing a wish she couldn't hide. No matter how good I knew her to be at pretending, it was clear they shared a long friendship. Was Jane, while enjoying her creamy potato soup, daydreaming about the prince? I wondered how deep that feeling went. After the meal, I felt exhausted. The day had worn me out both physically and mentally. I was weary from fatigue and felt a bit muddled after the many toasts to James and his new wife, to the well-being of England, and the good people of the Netherlands, among others. They offered me a place to stay, and I accepted. I wasn't fit to drive on dark roads with dimmed headlights. I said my goodbyes, and the Duchess wished me a good night. She instructed the old servant to show me to my room, which he did after I grabbed my bag from the car. A skilled assassin wouldn't need to hold a candle to see in the dark, so when the door creaked open, I didn't feel particularly alarmed. The Colt resting on my lap provided an extra layer of comfort. She entered, lifting the candle high enough to make sure I was clearly visible. Her gaze landed briefly on my weapon before she smiled, then walked over to the bed and slid beneath the covers. "I'm terribly cold," she whispered. A part of me knew that no gentleman would leave her like that, so I quickly removed my outer layers and joined her under the covers, where it was just as cold. With the candle blown out, the room was enveloped in complete darkness. There was no light, but we could still hear and feel each other. The closeness in the dark felt even more intense. We stayed close, touching softly, our hands moving gently, exploring. "I thought you'd be with him," I said quietly, testing the waters. I wanted to see how she'd react. Maybe she'd leave, or maybe she'd be upset. Instead, she paused for a moment, then placed her hand on me. "He's been my friend for a long time," she replied, "and he's getting married soon." Her answer sidestepped the question, but I decided not to press further. My focus shifted to the moment between us as we continued to hold each other gently. "I don't have protection," I murmured. She chuckled. "You carry a gun, but not that." I shifted slightly, and she responded with a soft laugh. We stayed like that for a while, sharing the warmth in silence. "You—" She started, but her words trailed off. Each moment was calm and slow, filled with gentle touches and pauses, allowing us to connect quietly. There were many ways to express affection without words. I focused on simple gestures, softly trailing my fingers along her arm, careful not to rush. Every small movement was meant to bring comfort and closeness, as I leaned in with tenderness. We shared an unspoken understanding, our connection deepened through each touch. Her soft sighs and gentle reactions guided me as I kept my touch light and reassuring. We found a rhythm together, one that was calm and soothing, simply enjoying the quiet moments. There was no need for anything else. The shared warmth between us was enough. Eventually, we found ourselves lying next to each other, a sense of peace settling over us as the night stretched on. It was a moment of quiet contentment, where nothing else mattered except the calm we had found together. Everything that followed remained soft and subtle, with no need for more than the shared comfort of two people simply being together. She started speaking in an unusual way, and her legs moved as if to shift away. Then she paused, her breathing steady. I carefully removed my hand, and her whole body tensed for a moment. What on earth? She looked surprised, almost as if she had stumbled upon something completely new. Thank you, Simone. March 1943. During the middle of my training class, I got a message to come to a specific office in Whitehall for tea. This was a way of saying we were going to discuss funding and supplies. The room number was just details. Tea was always part of these meetings. These discussions were often unremarkable, but provided an excuse to explore the shops in London for things that our small village near the camp didn't have. A young wren led me to the meeting room. Only one person was sitting at the large table with 12 chairs, which wasn't a good sign. The man had a prominent nose and thin lips, almost like he didn't have any at all. He was so clean-shaven that I wondered if he couldn't grow facial hair. He wore gold-rimmed glasses that obscured his watery blue eyes. Times were tough for him. He looked like he had lost a lot of weight and couldn't afford to have his clothes altered to fit him better. He introduced himself as Mayberry. I was sure that wasn't his real name, so I simply introduced myself. He seemed surprised by my accent, showing that he wasn't ready for our conversation. I, on the other hand, was prepared. I placed my bag down and sat across from him. There are certain plans being made, he said. His voice tried to sound more important than his appearance suggested. I suspected he practiced his lines in front of a mirror at home. He didn't even take the time to start with, "as you may know," or "you might have heard." No, he treated me like I was an inexperienced worker. "Are these your operations?" I asked. He smiled. "Something like that. In case, is your department in charge of these operations?" He didn't like me interrupting. I didn't catch your department. It seemed he was going to try the "you're not important enough" excuse. That is not important. I got it. I nodded as if I agreed, and he went ahead, ignoring the warning signs. He talked on and on while I sat with a small smile. In short, he and his unknown team had been given the go-ahead by some unnamed higher-ups to take charge of my networks as soon as they could change the communication lines and so on. No thanks. I was polite about it. "What?" He paused, surprised. We do not need your permission." "Okay, but I must decline your offer." He sat there for a moment, looking confused. "I'm afraid you don't understand, Cap. Call." He was trying to remember my title. "Mr. Voight," he finally said, trying to regain his composure. He had nothing. "You will hand over your networks. This is an order." I shook my head. "Nope." I stood as if I was about to leave. His face turned pale and red at the same time in different spots. The contrast was quite striking. "Are you refusing a direct order?" "Seems like it." "You can't do that." He had walked in confidently, but now confusion and worry were showing. "I will have you taken to court." "Mayberry," I said, "if you can figure out my rank." "Well, if you can even tell which flag I'm supposed to salute, then go right ahead. Let me know what you find, because I really have no idea." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. "See," I continued, "you must be from one of those unprofessional groups that the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare took in when they needed people to throw into tough situations. No one else would suggest such a silly idea. We have networks that took a long time to build. Disrupting their operations could be problematic, so no, you cannot have any of them." He bounced nervously in his seat, as if he was contemplating a rash decision. That wouldn't have been wise. "We will just take them," he said through clenched teeth, a tense expression on his face. "This kind of tension is typical for a serious spy master. I will send them a signal. Do you know what that is?" He didn't. He just stared at me, visibly frustrated. "It's the sign to start the escape plan. Leave everything behind and get out safely. Just go home." "You can't do that. I will make sure your agents are stopped if they try to return." Wow. That was Mayberry making a foolish statement right there. I thought about how many days the war could be shortened, and how many lives could be saved if I followed this person somewhere quiet and confronted him. Instead, I picked up my bag and said goodbye while he tried to order me to sit down and asked where I thought I was going. In the hallway, I turned off the recorder hidden in my bag. Someone I didn't know, but probably someone well known to Mayberry, would soon have a quiet talk with him. It would quickly become clear that threatening to arrest your own agents was a disastrous and career-ending decision. May 1943. I truly believed I would never see Lady Anne Jennings again. So it was surprising, considering how unpredictable my life had been lately, to find her sitting calmly on my cot one afternoon. She jumped to her feet and embraced me, the gesture simple and warm. She didn't offer a kiss, and I could feel her shaking slightly. "Oh, David, it's so good to see you." "It's good to see you too, Anne. What brings you here?" I asked. She pulled back a little to look at me, her smile warm but serious. "You? You don't owe anyone anything," she said, then paused. "Actually, wait. You do owe me." I tilted my head in confusion, unsure of what she meant. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small item. In her hand was a stack of cardboard squares, each printed with the distinctive design of Ramsay's prophylactics. Simone had a saying for moments like these, something about not gently guiding a nail into a board. You can imagine what that implied. Last time, the night had hidden her from view. But today, the light filled the room, leaving nothing in shadow. This building, hastily thrown together, had enormous windows, likely taken from some old greenhouse. The sun, unusually cooperative today, flooded the room, making everything clear. Instead of getting lost in that moment, I focused on keeping things simple. There was no rush or need for force, only a quiet understanding between us as we shared our time together. No need for words, just the two of us in a calm, sunlit room. I looked down at her with a sense of pride, like a leader ready to claim a victory. Her presence reminded me of our bond, and my heart raced in time with hers. Thoughts of flying a B-17 crossed my mind, a complex task guided by pilots who have trained hard and proven themselves. However, at the moment of truth, control shifts to the bombardier, who has a few critical buttons to push. In the same way, I felt my focus narrow down to a single purpose, feeling the urge build inside me, and I didn't need soft touches or gentle gestures today. I moved closer, and she called my name, repeating it with an intensity that filled the space between us. Tears welled in her eyes. "Why did you do this, David?" she managed to say. "Do you know how much I prepared for this?" I took one of the bedrooms in the main house since it wasn't being used much, and I needed the comfortable bed. Well, we both needed it. Jane was back, not as a student anymore. I gave her the job of teaching conversational French and encryption classes. The camp was busy now, with many trainees and just as many instructors and support staff. Mayberry had been right about something significant happening soon. Everyone knew we needed to prepare for an important operation on a French beach. In a place where many of our connections were, we often ate in the canteen or in the simple kitchen of the main house. I had a small office in a pantry where I read and wrote messages while Jane either taught an evening class or translated technical documents. Each night, we extended our help to one or two Egyptians. The countryside was seeing more American troops passing through for practice, or just moving between groups of tents. We often had to redirect them from our narrow lane and explain that they couldn't just go wherever they wanted. Many American officers acted like they understood the area better than our older English soldiers. This is why I kept a collection of Thompson submachine guns in my guard shack. These guns were powerful and made quite an impression when shown to anyone who tried to come in uninvited, causing them to back off quickly. So when I heard a noise at the gate, I assumed it was just another misunderstanding. It wasn't until I arrived at the main house later that evening that I realized it was more serious. Jane looked very unsettled. Something unusual for her, as she was usually quite calm. She was standing by the kitchen window holding a cup. I approached her and placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the tension beneath. I gently turned her to face me. "What's wrong?" I asked softly. She shook her head, leaving me unsure if she didn't want to tell me anything or if it was something I shouldn't know. The cup shook slightly in her hands, rippling the tea inside. I waited quietly, knowing she would speak when she was ready. After a moment, she finally opened up. "It was just an old friend come to visit." I sent him away. "Captain Cowie, then?" She flinched a bit at the mention of his name. I wondered what she thought I did all day. "Yes." She looked down into her cup. "I'm surprised he found you." Her lip almost went to bite, but stopped quickly. It was close, but I knew I had the upper hand. I didn't press further since I'd already gained what I needed. "What did he want?" I asked, pretending not to know. "Me." "He made his intentions clear?" She nodded. "I said no. I told him to leave and not come back. He won't give up." She nodded again. "He has already told his family that you agreed to marry him." "How?" She started realizing she knew about my day-to-day. "Did you give him any reason to think that?" The lip trembled again. Of course she had. She hadn't said yes, but she hadn't firmly said no either. Now he thought he could hold on to hope. He was important, after all. I suspected Colonel Carmichael would show up soon, too. Maybe I could arrange a contest between them. "I can't allow one of my best trainers to be distracted now. I need you to handle this." She looked at me with genuine interest. "How?" "Marry me." Our honeymoon was a simple meal of the local pub's best drinks and some bread and cheese during a long lunch. Then we returned to our tasks. People and supplies were pouring into the island, but what really kept everything running was information. My networks were more important to the Allied effort than ever, and we relied on them more than I ever imagined a year ago. I assigned Jane to oversee 3 networks, including Maelstrom. I was overwhelmed with logistics, meetings, phone calls, and training. Everyone in our group always seemed to be in a hurry to get somewhere else. We all expected something big to happen soon. One morning, while I was eating oatmeal and looking at photos of a railroad bridge near Rouen, my phone rang. "Hello, David. It's Mickey. Guess what? I just became a captain. I owe it all to you, brother. Can we meet for a drink to celebrate?" I didn't recognize the name Mickey, but I played along, congratulating him anyway. "Can you come to the city? Let's meet at that place where you danced with Ska? Tomorrow at 9? I felt uneasy, but I tried to act like an old friend. After I hung up, I just stared at the phone. The dance with Ska had to be the hotel where I had stayed briefly, the Cumberland. That was where a woman named Chodakowska had changed my life, and not for the better. I grabbed my bag and rushed to the train station. July 1943. The man who called himself Mickey was wearing a U.S. Army captain's uniform. It looked nice and was in good shape. His rank insignia looked new. I knew about these things. Our group had many men and women who could change clothes and fit into different situations without attracting attention. We often met with refugees from Europe to buy their old clothes, and then our tailors adjusted them for our agents. I suspected that Mickey was more than just a captain. He seemed to be with Army intelligence, but he didn't say so. We had a few drinks in the hotel bar, then took a walk in Hyde Park. In a quiet gazebo by the lake, he showed me a letter signed by Eisenhower. I didn't know his signature, so it didn't mean much to me. But then there was another letter signed by Boyce asking me to help the person who carried it. I recognized that name, so I asked my friend Mickey what was going on. It was straightforward. Mickey and his friends wanted me to mislead the Germans into thinking that the Allies would land near Calais. They planned to use different networks in Normandy to feed the enemy false information, making them believe that Normandy was not our target. It seemed easy enough, but this told me that Normandy was indeed where we were heading. This knowledge was very important and needed to be kept secret. Now I knew, and soon my team would know too. This made us all potential targets for the Nazis and raised suspicions about our loyalty within the Allies. Handling that kind of information was risky. No wonder they had to create a fake identity for Mickey. It was a tricky situation. My team was asked to show some falsehoods to the enemy while we had been doing everything we could to stay unnoticed. It was a dangerous game to play. I thought of my dear friend Clafoutis and what she might say to comfort me. Her words would have been direct and encouraging, telling me to be brave and act like a leader. Mickey looked at me a bit confused when I smiled and assured him we would complete the mission. March 1944. My team came up with several clever ways to draw German attention away from Normandy and toward Calais. Mickey visited our camp a few times to share ideas and check on our work. It turned out his real name was Colonel Robert Devers. I kept calling him Mickey and didn't greet him formally. Jane told me that her mother, who had once expressed strong disapproval of our relationship, had come to accept it. Her mother's change of heart was due to her diagnosis with a serious illness that required treatment in London a few times a month. On those days, Jane would take time off to spend the night with her at the hospital. We were already short on staff and very busy, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her she couldn't go. One morning I was making a list of tasks when I came up with an idea for a training exercise. I wrote down, "Stella and Bingham follow Jane." Not long after, I had the 2 trainees in my office. "My wife is taking a train to London today." I checked my watch. "On the 10:05, I want you 2 to keep an eye on her. She is going to St. Bartholomew's to see her mother, who is receiving treatment. Your job is to follow her, take some photos, and give me a complete report on what she does." Bingham, a short man with deep-set eyes, shook his head. "Sounds easy." "It won't be," I replied. "She was trained here, remember? She knows how to notice when someone is following her. Your only advantage is that she won't expect it. She'll likely be focused on her mother." "That does sound tough," Stella said thoughtfully. "It feels a bit unkind." "Not really," Bingham said casually. "She'll never know we're there." The next day, I took a class out to the wetlands and we used some large charges of the latest safe material to demolish an old bridge support. There's nothing quite like pressing the button and seeing the powerful effects we can create with the advancements in science. My only regret was that we didn't have enough buildings within a good walking distance. I returned to camp and cleaned off as much of the English countryside as I could. Then I went to my office. On my way, I thought I saw Stella's back as she turned a corner by the dining hall, but I quickly dismissed it. Bingham and Stella would tell me what I needed to know when they got back, or so I thought. There was a large manila envelope on my desk with no name on it. A wave of worry surged in my stomach. I pulled out the contents, smooth and clear, and they were shocking. Now I understood why my team hadn't come to me right away. In the photos, Jane and James Griffiths White were walking closely together down a shaded sidewalk. It looked innocent enough. Just childhood friends, right? But friends didn't share such warmth like they did in the next picture. They were embracing each other at what seemed to be the entrance of a fancy hotel. In the following shot, James was writing in a guest book while Jane stood nearby. Beneath the fresh photographs was a report. I only needed a quick glance to feel my last bit of safety crumble. Jane had left the hotel in the morning. I paced my room, holding the evidence, my logical mind telling me this was bound to happen, while my emotional side wanted to take action. Finally, I picked up the phone and asked to be connected to Monsyth House. After a brief wait, I asked the assistant to get her Grace for me. "Hello?" she answered, her voice sharp, mixing annoyance with authority. "Your Grace," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "This is David Voigt. I'm calling to check on your well-being." I heard her take a breath, which seemed to say, "How dare you? I do not know why you are calling me. I'm not going to discuss personal matters. You're not dealing with a serious issue, then?" I expected her to hang up, but she remained calm. "What are you talking about?" Then she asked, "Who are you?" It was her way of putting me in my place. She already knew who I was. "I'm your son-in-law." She was taken aback. I figured that was a sound not heard at Monsyth House in a long time. "I don't know what you're up to, but I won't entertain it." Then she abruptly ended the call. I placed my phone down softly and took a seat to wait. She opened the door just as the sun was setting. The door always stuck, a small flaw that remained because there were greater concerns to handle. I guess the sun was setting by its position behind the usual English clouds. When she saw me sitting quietly, not at my desk or flipping through papers, just sitting still, she recognized something was different. "When was the last time I just sat quietly?" "How long?" I asked softly. She looked into my eyes, unapologetic. "Since we were in school." I didn't need to ask how often. It was as frequent as possible, at gatherings and opulent homes. I had just one question. "That night?" At last, a small sign of embarrassment. She knew which night I meant and nodded. I also didn't need to ask why. I didn't want to know, and frankly, I didn't care. Once she realized my part of the questioning was finished, she said, "I thought you would understand. I stared in astonishment at this woman who turned out to be a better player than I ever realized. Too bad for me she was on both sides. Understand? Am I supposed to understand that the promises you made to me meant something different? Something less serious? Because my understanding of the situation was clearly very different from yours. She shrugged, which told me that I had not grasped how her group interacted. It also hinted that it was my fault for being an American, narrow-minded and focused on small details like promises. He knows you are married. It was a statement, not a question. Her eyes darted, confirming it. I took a deep breath. I need to have a talk with... I couldn't bring myself to say his name. Now I saw concern in her eyes. No, she said. You can't. I absolutely can. No. He's gone. Gone? He signed up. He'll be in France by now. I jumped to my feet. What do you mean? She twisted her hands together, clearly anxious. He is jealous of you, of what you have achieved. You told him about my work? I shouted, losing my temper. She nodded. He was just... I never thought he would... Who is his supervisor? A man named Mayberry? I laughed, which upset her. David, she snapped. Sorry, I was just thinking about how I won't have to deal with him anymore. Mayberry didn't even bother to change his name. Her face showed concern and confusion. He'll be in danger soon, I said coldly. The enemy will find him as soon as he arrives in France. She let out a small gasp as she recognized the truth in my words. April 1944. I slept in my cot while Jane rested in our big, comfortable bed in the old house. I talked to her about training and nothing else. I did not reach out to her. After a few days, I found her sitting on my cot in the dark. No, I said, and held the door open. David, you make me feel things that he never did. Please. No, Anne. She flinched at my use of her real name. It felt like I could have hurt her less by simply expressing my disapproval. After we finish, once the war is over, then we'll decide what to do next. Until then, we focus on our jobs. She nodded and stood up. As she left, she whispered, I'm sorry, David. The next morning, the radio operator sent someone to find me. We had lost contact with Maelstrom. All day and into the next, we tried to reach the 3 agents. There was no one else to help, no authorities to notify, no neighbors to ask for assistance. Silence. Sometimes, agents go off the air. Their radio might break or they need to move to avoid unwanted attention. In the worst cases, they make a mistake or the enemy catches them off guard. They could be captured and questioned. Clafoutis did not contact us. The other 2 agents were also unreachable. My greatest worry was becoming more real. When an entire network is exposed and goes silent, it's called a roll-up. This means they have been betrayed and captured without warning, making it hard for anyone to escape. They are taken away without a trace. The first thing I did was send for Jane. Maelstrom belonged to her. But when the young Wren went to get her from the big house, she came back saying Jane was missing. I went to check myself. Her travel bag was gone, and so was the Hillman. After 2 days of stressful searching with no results, I stood in the quiet, empty space that was our bedroom. I had reasons to doubt Jane's commitment to me, but I never questioned her dedication to her work. So where had she gone? Then it hit me. Of course! I shouted and rushed out of the room. I found the Hillman crashed into a hedgerow on a narrow road 1/2 mile from the small RAF base near Wadhurst. I parked my Jeep and looked inside. I found her suitcase in the back, filled with clothes and shoes. It seemed like she had another outfit. Using my ID, I got into the base. I peeked into the officers' club and the barracks until I found the man I needed, kneeling on the grass under one of the big wings of a Lysander. He looked up and waved as I walked closer. Hey, Voight, what brings you here? He asked. I took out a photo of Jane from our honeymoon. She was smiling at the camera, full of light in the pub with a celebratory drink in front of her dot. He studied the photo and then handed it back to me. Normally, he should have pulled out his gun and taken me to the base commander for asking questions I wasn't supposed to. My wife, I said softly. He muttered something, either a concern or a thought. Then he stood up to face me. I took her across last night. Where to? I asked Dot. He paused, looking uneasy. I could tell he didn't want to share too many details. Just a simple drop. Simple? I echoed. Every time he flew over France with someone not in uniform, it felt like a risky move. He took a big chance every night and called it simple. The strange part is, she wanted me to drop her near Rennes instead. You know that's not usual. She tried to convince me, but it didn't work. He shook his head. So you dropped her in Dreux? He nodded. Did she have everything she needed? From what I saw, an old suitcase and a radio, cloak and shoes. I thought for a moment. Did you get some rest? He looked at me, understanding my concern. Tonight? He didn't look pleased. I put Jane's picture back in my wallet. Tonight. Bauman didn't flinch when the Armée de l'Armistice sergeant approached him in the street. He could have been a great poker player if that game was popular in the Third Reich. It was clear he recognized me right away. He seemed to know everything and exhibited a calmness that helped him navigate the tense and uncertain Germany he lived in. He had every reason to be cautious, as he was discreetly working against his own country. I gave him a salute, like a loyal but not overly devoted person from Vichy France might do. He returned the salute with a coolness that matched our situations, then signaled for me to follow him to the Abwehr building. Once inside a small office, he told me to sit down. I handed him the photo. He looked at it briefly and nodded. She's here. Very impressive, he said, sounding genuinely impressed. If only she had remained in Dreux. She claims to have come for her brother. She asked too many questions. I held back my own questions. We have him too. He was not as clever. I didn't press for details. He gave up information easily. One of his friends was shot trying to get away. The other jumped from a tall building. I could feel my heart pounding, but I remained calm. He smiled, perhaps enjoying my discomfort. The woman with the red hair was captured alive. I shut my eyes, focusing on maintaining my composure. She kept up her act until the very end. Stay calm. Stay calm. So, we got nothing from your entire network, and the one remaining is of no use. It took me less than a minute with him to realize that. Why do you send me such people? I shook my head, my voice feeling distant. About this woman, he tapped the photo again. I can see she knows a lot. Our eyes locked for a moment. Finally, he said, if I give you what you want, you'll give me what I want. I nodded and waited for him to continue. When the time comes, you will use your network to assist me. I nodded again, knowing I had no other choice. If he utilized harsh methods against Jane, she would reveal too much. He held all the advantages in this critical situation, which was far from a game. I had always pondered whether Bauman was truly bad. He cared about Germany, but it was a vision of Germany that had only existed briefly over the past 50 years. He despised Hitler and his regime, particularly for trying to demand loyalty to him rather than to Germany itself. Oberstleutnant. Peter Bauman knew that if the Germans lost, life would be very difficult. But if they won, it would be even worse. For 2 years, he had not supported them, nor did he support us. He only cared about his own interests. Now I was going to help him escape if he needed it when the moment arrived. I stepped out through a back door and found myself in a wild garden where I felt hidden from view. I gazed up at the sky. Bright patches peeked through the red clouds above me. I felt tears well up in my eyes, and I whispered silently, I quote, sorry, Moira. I really am sorry. After I revealed my presence to Jane, Bauman took us in a car into the forest. As twilight settled in, he stopped at a farmhouse surrounded by trees and open fields. He led us into a big front room. Jane gasped. A man was tied to one of the old tree trunks that held up the ceiling. He was blindfolded, gagged, and injured, but it was clear he was James Griffiths White. He was still alive and still in line for the English throne. She tried to rush to him, but Bauman grabbed her and pushed her into a wooden chair. Is this your brother? He asked, clearly doubting her answer. She nodded, breathing heavily, her eyes wide as she looked at the bound man. He had lost some blood, but he was still alive. In another room of the empty house, a clock ticked steadily. Bauman glanced at his watch, then turned to look out the window. No moon tonight. Madame Gouy, I have a problem. There are troublemakers here in Côte d'Armor, and I think you know who they are. Here's my offer. If you tell us their names, I will let you and your brother go. If not, I will put your brother in danger and tell my superiors the issue is taken care of." Jane was crying softly. Tears flowed down her cheeks without stopping. A gun appeared in Bauman's hand. He pointed it at James and looked at Jane. "Madame?" she sobbed. James moaned through the cloth in his mouth. Bauman pulled the trigger, aiming slightly up. The loud sound filled the room like a crash. Jane screamed. I could see her mouth open wide, but I just heard a buzzing noise in my ears. "Madame?" Bauman aimed the gun again, this time more carefully. Jane broke down. He... She pointed a shaking finger at me. "He is an American." The gun pointed straight at my heart. Jane's face changed from guilt to hope. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I thought you were Canadian," Bauman said. Now Jane looked confused. "On my mother's side." Bauman laughed and put the gun away. Jane almost fell apart from relief as she realized what had just happened. "Oh, David," she cried, "can we go home?" But her eyes were drawn to James. She had told him about Maelstrom, secrets shared in quiet moments that led to consequences far worse than any trouble he caused. Her carelessness could cost many lives. Just minutes ago, she had picked his safety over her husband's. "Yes," I lied. I looked at Bauman. He met my gaze. He nodded slightly. I stepped out the door without looking back. No moon. I started to run toward the open fields. My feet pounded against the ground and my heart raced in my chest, but I thought I could faintly hear the hum of an engine in the distance. The first shot made me stumble. I hit the ground hard, my face scraping painfully against the rough earth. For a few moments I lay there, dazed. Another shot rang out. I forced myself back up and kept running. The plane had just come to a stop. The pilot had helped many agents escape before. Some of them must have been terrified. Epilogue. 12 February, 1996. London, I look past my wife and out at the fading London skyline. The streetlights 12 stories below are flickering on as the evening grows darker. It's been a cold, windy day, but we managed to sleep through most of it, trying to recover from our journey. We had driven 5 hours from Brooklyn, Maine to Boston, then spent 7 hours in the air to get to London, not to mention the time difference. The trip made me feel every year of my age. Strangely enough, while I feel older, the woman standing by the window looks just as youthful as ever. She often jokes that my eyesight is fading along with her appearance, and that's why I always see her as unchanged. I usually agree with her to avoid any argument, but she's wrong. My glasses work fine. I see her exactly as she is, and what I see I still love deeply. I get up from the sofa and walk over to her, wrapping my arms around her. She sighs softly, leaning into me as we stand together. "Remembering?" I whisper. She nods, lost in thought. I hold her close, savoring the quiet moment, grateful for this peaceful time after a life full of difficult secrets. "It was a good nap then?" she asks softly. She shifts slightly, a hint of playfulness in her tone, but I recognize her intent. I feel a warm connection between us, a familiarity that has deepened over the years. "You took that pill," she remarks. I don't answer. It's a question that doesn't need one. I bend my knees and position myself, feeling a sense of comfort in our shared understanding. The 22nd of May, 1945, London, I was... what? 27, 28? I couldn't think straight. I had been an army cadet, an officer, a boat builder, a carpenter, a sailor, a wild blueberry picker, and a potato sorter. I had seen things and dealt with situations that were tough. All that, and I had never learned to enjoy strong drinks. Just beer and wine for me. Anything stronger burned too much. And yet here I was, sitting in a dim corner of the king's own heart with a bottle of something called White Horse in front of me and a glass beside it. Glass? Forget it. I was drinking straight from the bottle. It was a cheap whiskey, but it did the job. It tasted odd, not great, like varnish with a hint of apple. Not that I was very picky anymore. The day after VE Day, I drove my Hillman into London and parked it where I shouldn't have, leaving the keys in the ignition. I checked into a room at the Langham and then crossed the street to a pub. I started trying every bottle of gin, vodka, whiskey, and rum they had. I picked a drink and decided to get really drunk until I didn't know when. Maybe until the crowds in the streets and parks stopped celebrating. Every cheer and song felt loud and irritating. Maybe until I forgot my own name, my past, and everything else in my life. I felt like an old car, just parked and left behind, waiting for someone else to take me away. The problem was, something I didn't realize since I wasn't much of a drinker until recently, that getting drunk can sometimes make you remember more, not less. Losing consciousness only pushed the memories to come back later. Every day I thought about buying a book to read, something to take my mind off everything. But I never made it to a bookstore. Instead, I just paid the bartender to help me back to my hotel at closing time. There were plenty of newspapers at the pub, but I didn't want to read the news. I looked at a painting of a moody Henry VIII when someone caught my eye. I tried to wave them away as I still had some drink left. But the figure didn't leave. It sat down across from me. "Hello, David," Boyce said. He signaled the bartender, who brought him an empty glass. Boyce poured from my bottle and took a sip. Interesting. I can't remember the last time I had this. I turned my head away. Boyce reminded me of some difficult times, and I didn't want to think about that. I reached for the bottle, but Boyce held it tightly and wouldn't let go. "Let's take a walk," he suggested. I shook my head. It was the last thing I wanted to do. But Boyce, who still looked a bit messy, always got his way. We walked down the street to the park. He walked ahead while I leaned slightly on him. Luckily, the excitement of victory was fading quickly. The park was quiet. Everyone was probably worried about the war with Japan. Boyce kept talking the whole time. He mentioned the weather, the big football match between England and France he went to in 1933, his new Zippo lighter, his wife's love for tea roses, the best fertilizers for those roses, and more. I realized I was sober, or close enough. I stopped walking. "What do you want?" I asked. He turned to me. "What should I expect?" "Just still here," I said with a shrug. He couldn't know how many times in the last 2 weeks I had looked at my Colt and thought about it, wondering if feeling nothing in a place without memories would be better than the painful thoughts that kept coming back like a record stuck on one song. We watched a mother duck leading her 5 little ducklings toward the water. Interested in a new job? He was hinting at his new position with MI6, a high role in the organization. "No, thank you. I would rather not have to take another person's life if I can help it." He nodded in a patient way, just like my father used to do. "The offer stands. Come talk to me if you change your mind." He took out a small white envelope from his pocket and handed it to me. "This is for you. I'm told it's genuine." The envelope had my name, David, written in a fancy flowing script. 23 May 1945 London. The address was in Bromley, an apartment above a tobacco shop. I climbed the stairs and tapped on the door. My heart raced. I felt a bit dizzy. She opened the door and smiled, mixing joy with nervousness. "Hello, David," she said. Then her eyes found the card I was holding. "I'm sorry. I thought this would be the best way to bring you here." Inside the card was the address and one word, Clafoutis. It was a brief moment of clarity, but it felt extraordinary, and now it felt like it wasn't. I knew it couldn't be true. I stood there, feeling empty as if for the last time. Please let it be the last time. Her expression changed. She didn't say sorry. Chodakowska took my arm and guided me inside. I sank onto a sofa. She pulled up a chair and sat nearby, leaning closer. We took a moment to breathe. My breathing gradually steadied. "My name is Elżbieta." I nodded almost blankly. "I needed to see you. I needed you to see—" Just then, a boy came into the room. He was pulling a toy truck along with a string. He looked at me, his innocent face full of curiosity. Then he spoke quickly in Polish to Elżbieta. He had her lips, but his eyes, nose, and ears, even the shape of his head. I quickly looked away from him to focus on Elżbieta. She had tears in her eyes but wouldn't meet my gaze. "David, I was inexperienced that day." I realized I was staring in surprise. I survived, but I felt hurt inside. After I healed, I was scared of men. I felt anger towards them. I nodded, understanding her words. When I met you, I felt safe. I was drawn to you in a way I hadn't felt before. That day was special to me, even though I called it a test. It wasn't a test. I wanted you to be someone significant to me. Does that sound silly after? No, not at all. She seemed grateful for my response and wiped her eyes. When she began to notice changes in her life, she didn't think much of it. The past had made her cycles irregular, and it took 3 months before she saw a doctor and got the news. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to distract you. What could you have done anyway? No, I kept it to myself. The doctor told me the chances weren't very good for me to carry the baby to term. My body had healed, but it was still weak. The scars. Her body managed to hold together until the birth. When her water broke, the pains disrupted the fragile connections inside her. The scars opened. The baby came out healthy, but Elżbieta needed a lot of surgery to be safe. One miracle baby. There wouldn't be any more. She named him Dawid Voigt. She brought me the birth certificate to show me proudly. My tired mind wondered about names. Would he be a junior? Did all the names have to match? Were there even rules for this? Dawid came over to us and pointed at his toy truck. Ford, he said seriously. Elżbieta smiled down at him. I wanted him to meet you before you... Her voice paused. Before you go back to America. I looked at the kid's serious little face. The same eyes I had seen in pictures of myself as a child. The shape of his nose, ears, and even his head. My world changed again. I felt like I had been lifted and turned in a new direction. I stood and helped Elżbieta to her feet. I hugged her tightly. I didn't need to say I would never leave her. I didn't need to say I cared deeply for her and our son. All of that was clear in the embrace. Later I would find the words. I would show them in other ways. I felt a gentle tug and looked down. My son had his own way of hugging. His arms were wrapped around his mother's legs, and he stretched his hands to hold on to me, too. The 13th of February, 1996, London. The West Cloister of Westminster Abbey is a long, quiet hallway made of stone. The floor, columns, and arches are designed to give monks a place to sit, copy books, or read in natural light. They would gather there to talk, think, or simply take a break from the pressures of a monk's life. Sometimes in groups of 1, 2, or 3. It was not meant for big meetings. Today it was definitely not set up for the 100 or so chairs placed closely together, facing an inner wall covered by a large blue cloth. As the time approached, the chairs filled up, so I sent the grandchildren to find seats at the side, leaving room for their older family members. The Voigt family was here in full force. That includes me, Els, Dawid, and his wife. Their 3 boys, 1 daughter, and all their partners were also present. We had 6 teens, 4 toddlers, and 1 expectant mother among us. Everyone had rearranged their schedules to be here because I had told them how much it meant to me and Els. I had planned a family dinner for later in a private room. After we eat, the younger children will go with a caregiver. My wife and I will then share our life story with them. Some already know bits and pieces, but tonight, everything will be shared. As the politicians finish their speeches, the Queen Mother walks to the wall. The crowd is silent. I don't recognize any faces, which makes me feel good as a former agent, but a bit sad as an older person. Her Majesty pulls a cord and the cloth falls. Beneath it is a simple marble plaque of a modest size, fitting for a group that always preferred to remain in the background. It says, Special Operations Executive in memory of the members of all nationalities of SOE who upheld the spirit of resistance and gave their lives for the freedom of the occupied lands. 1,945, more than 3,000 notable individuals are buried in the abbey, in crypts, in tombs, and beneath the floor. There are no remains to be placed under this stone. They are lost somewhere, maybe in France, Germany, or out in the ocean. Maurice Plowman and John Trevor are part of the Maelstrom Network. James Griffiths White, Lady Anne Jennings, Moira Haining. After a while, the kids take taxis to the hotel. The news reporters leave to cover other stories. The place is quiet and cold now. Only memories remain with us. Elżbieta and I stand in front of the memorial, our fingers intertwined. It was so, she says softly, reaching out with her other hand to touch the carved words. We were so young. We did what we thought was right. I respond gently. The memories deserve to rest. The best we could at the time. What if we had a chance to do it all over again? She whispers. Our hands hold on a little tighter,